And we're going? Yeah. Awesome. So we're using the same amount of clay that we use for our cylinders, which is about a 1/3 of the log type shape. Okay, so same start, centering, slap center or pushing it center without any water, the best you can first. The more center it is before you start, the easier centering is. Then, of course, seal the bottom, just like before. Water the clay. Practice starting to hold your sponge while you throw now. It's just going to make things easier for you, just keeping that in your hands. I always start with downward pressure to help it stick to the wheel. And cone it up. Bring it down. There's that back and forth. So this is not different than before. That coning up. Clean up the bottom. Don't let any buttresses form. A buttress is that extra clay that forms down on the bottom. So clean that as you go, so you have a clear wheel head. Eventually, the fastest wheel speed is actually best. I'm feeling the muscles in my core as I press in, and I slowly relax to let go. Again, if you get that buttress, just clean that up. You can use your fingers or your rib. So I'm finishing this at a slightly more vertical shape. If the top is uneven, I want to show you a new trick. It's called the fish hook. You know, like a Jesus fish shape? Okay? So I'm going to draw one on the top, right here. So with the wheel going, so let's say the top of this is not even, but everything else is looking pretty good. Take my fingers and I start here and I do that move. I go to the top, up, and back down. It's a good way to fix the top of these. Okay, so now we're ready. Slightly more vertical. I'm gonna open it. I like to set my hand on the wheel head for support when I can reach. I'm being careful that I'm not pressing on this clay too much because you might be preventing it from going where it needs to go. So if I'm putting weight on here and weight on here, where's the clay going to go? Okay, a reminder on how to measure the depth. Make a little square, shift it over like this, and then move it over. Look at how much space is below that. We're looking for about a 1/2 inch. You can estimate that. 1/2 inch is like finger diameter, somewhere around that. That would be fine. So that's a good way to measure the depth. In fact, the first thing I'm going to do is make this finger group. So I'm going to get the sponge behind my fingers, and I'm using 2 hands, and I'm bracing myself, and I'm pushing down hard to the wheel, and in just a little bit. I don't even have an inside hand. See that? But if I do this one-handed, I'm not very strong. You know? Brace yourself. Always have that triangle of contact. Lap, lap, hands. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes you guys on the kick wheel or because of posture or whatever, you might lose one of the connection points. But if you lose more than one, you've got no strength. Okay, so now I'm going to get in there. Left hand, right hand. So I'm going to start by pushing inwards. And then my fingers are going to push out. But out and up, like this. And I'm squeezing and bringing that clay up, up, up. Pause. Release. See how the rim is thicker? That's what we want. Anytime the clay feels dry or sticky, just rehydrate. You won't slip on the whole thing. You can always stop and just put water on it. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes when I do that, I'll go ahead with the sponge after and just clean up the wheel head a little bit. Okay, now where's the clay thick and thin? Right now it's thinnest here and still thickest down there. And see, I still have some extra clay here. That's the hardest clay to get up, so that's what I want to focus on. So I'm going to go back to the bottom, push hard down to the wheel. My thumbs are bridged. And I'm pushing in. Now my inside hand is holding there. The clay doesn't go just in. I want the clay to go up. Now essentially I have my new bubble, don't I? Only it doesn't have like an inside bubble like the other ones. But I do have that extra clay that I'm trying to get under. Use my hands to bring up. See how it gets a little wider each time. Keep the rim the thickest. Smooth as you go. Back down to the bottom. How do you know you're done? It's when it's that even thickness. It's going to get wider each time. The rim will get thinner each time, but the rim has to stay thicker than the walls. Sometimes I throw down instead of up. So as we threw up, technically it made a spiral, right? So if I go in slow motion, haven't I just made a spiral that goes up? Now if I go the opposite direction, doesn't that spiral kind of cancel out the first one in a way? So it's actually a nice way to even out the clay. So it looks like this. It's kind of like throwing with no bubble. Start at the top, I go down, but this is why this is important. When I get to here, my outside hand can't go anywhere, can it? But my inside hand can go all the way to the middle and then back. And then my hand catches up. So why do that? Since that extra clay was so thick in there, you need to compress and align the clay particles. So your hand needs to go all the way to the middle and back, middle and back. And that's also reinforcing the curved shape that you want on the inside. So once again, it looks like this. Down, then going to the middle. My thumbs are still touching. And then back. All right, how thin can I go? I'm looking at it, and I can see the thickness of the wall, so I'm going to bring that up a little bit more. What if it's flopping down too much? It is possible to collar it in some, but there's a real limit there. Sometimes when you do that, you introduce some unevenness. So just be careful doing that. Now, do you notice how the outside is a pretty straight line right now? And the inside should be a similar straight line, but then it curves in the middle. But when you think, all right, I've got it the thickness I want, I have the rim I want, but I don't have the final curve. That's where you come in with one of these. The wooden rib, or these are laser cut ribs that we made. There's all kinds of different shapes. But here's how you use it. We need to switch our hands, and I'm right-handed. So if I do this, I don't feel so good about that. Maybe you do. If you're left-handed, you'll probably do that. But I can't do that. So here's what you do. Hold it in your right hand, and you just flip your hands like this. So instead of here, flip. My outside hand is just there for support. It doesn't do a lot. I'm going to start at the top. And I'm going to go down. And create the final curve. So the outside will now have a little bit more curve. Not a lot, it still looks kind of straight, but that's because down here needs trimmed. So I'll come back and trim that later. You can do that more times if you want to fine tune the shape. That's where the mirror is amazing, because you can see the exact shape. Otherwise, you might need to get off the wheel and look at it to see it at eye level, to really know what you've made. So it's okay to go back and push in a little bit more. Then, last touch on the rim. I don't like how my rim is level right now. I don't think that looks great. So there's a couple ways you can round it out. One way is you guys have webbing between your fingers. So some potters do this as a smoothing strategy. Your thing works pretty well. The sponge works okay as well. But if you do too much sponge work, the sponge actually removes the fine particles and leaves the rougher particles. Or just your fingers. I like to do this. I like that little angle, because to me, that gives a line that the glaze breaks on, and I think it looks nice. But I'm not too worried about obsessing about this, okay? Let's just focus on getting a good shape. Okay, so I sometimes like when there's a little spiral on the inside. So what you can do is support your hand, and you can get in there with the fingertip, go right to the middle, and then stop. And it puts little nice throwing lines in the bottom. Some bowls have more obvious throwing lines. If you go with the slower wheel speed, you can make a bolder statement. So sometimes that's a nice little touch. But at the very least, didn't my rib reach all the way down there? That was really, really important to remove the slip and to compress and align the clay particles. So this rib goes down, or you can use any of the laser cut ribs. It's the same thing, getting it down in there and back up. All right, so I want to clean up some of this clay just to make trimming it easier. So there's a couple ways. This rib works pretty well. You can get it like this, or like this, or like this. What you need to do is position it so it is carving, not compressing. So if it's like this and the clay is moving away, isn't that just pushing in the clay? But if it's angled towards you, that's cutting the clay. So you just lay it down on the wheel, 2 hands, brace yourself. You can take away some of that extra clay. Makes it easier to hold and manage. Okay, you don't have to go way in there, but if you can't reach, you can do the same thing with this. So you hold it so it's angled towards you, brace yourself, and you can get in, clean it up. And then this has a little sort of off-ramp feature. You can get it in like this. Try to scoop up that excess clay, get that out of there. Now, we want to go all the way under this. If you pick it up too soon, you're going to cut your pot. You don't want that. If this is hard to grip, you may use a toggle wire that are hanging up there. But what you need to do is use your thumbs and push down to the wheel head. Slow wheel speed. You don't just be calm and just come straight towards yourself. Keep it tight. Make sure it's all the way clear and then lift it up. Now it's ready to remove. Piece of wood, get it close by. You can use pot lifters. You can use pot lifters from this drawer. Make sure they're clean. If you put them back dirty, then it's going to leave marks. But if you want to just do this yourself, I don't want to touch up here. So I like to get in like this or this, whatever feels better for you. Some people get in like this. Okay? You can get in like this. And you just take that clay and you give it a little move on there. If it bumps and it ovals out, sometimes you can just give it a little bump to straighten it. But try to avoid touching the top of the bowl. So this is now ready to dry until it's leather hard. Now what if you're like, you just did this, it's the end of class. Well, if it sits on this bowl or on this board and you just drape plastic over it overnight on your shelf, but leave a little bit open, it'll be leather hard the next day. But never store a project on bare wood for more than a day or it can get moldy and it can dry too much. That's because wood is an organic material and organic things get moldy. All right?